This came to me in May of '84. It's a note from my grandfather. I forgot to send you clippings about it, but Boise's big downtown regional shopping center project, after 20 years of trying, has been given up. The fifth development company threw up its hands, said too much local dissension made success impossible. There is much frustration about the situation. Some folks are mad, others are glad. But I think that in time, a pretty good but different job can be accomplished for downtown. In order to have this phoenix rising from the ashes, first you had to have ashes, and I think they took care of that in the 70s.
Some describe Boise in the early 70s as looking like it had been bombed out.
Industries moved away, you had these big empty buildings.
You had the remains of what had been really a capital for the whole mining industries of Idaho and beyond, which had then slowly eroded.
People just wanted something new, something exciting, and downtown had become stale.
The Boise Redevelopment Agency bought into the conventional wisdom at that time that to redevelop an urban area, you first had to destroy it.
The problems of our cities are real, the heavy hand of old-fashioned design. As a people, however, we are steadfast as we tackle problems. The hammer of demolition will be sure to swing with determination as we clear away the structures that block progress.
The vision that the city leadership had developed was to build a mall.
They thought, we will have a shovel-ready site, which will just be so easy for a developer to come into.
And they cleared this 4 blocks where we're sitting to be the location of that mall. But there was a growing resistance within the city to that.
Larson says he needed full community support to develop a downtown mall, support he says was not there.
We have concluded that the regional retail component of the mixed-use plan is not feasible.
With all that dissension and all the disagreements, they went through developer after developer. No one really wanted to be part of this because Boise was seen as maybe a dysfunctional group of people that didn't really have an idea or didn't have a plan.
And downtown really fell into disrepair.
As the city began to realize it wasn't going to build a mall downtown, it had to figure out what to do.
There was clearly a sort of widespread depression about the fact that they'd knocked down the middle of their city and nothing had happened. Things had just gone from bad to worse since then.
It's kind of like they had to hit rock bottom chasing that idea to then come together and say, okay, we need help.
The Regional Urban Design Assistance Team was composed of member architects of the American Institute of Architects from around the nation. They began arriving in Boise on the afternoon of Thursday, October the 10th.
Bringing RUDAT in was really a brilliant move on BRA's point of view because it was no longer them as individual Boiseans speaking, it was this national expert body. That created a very useful environment for open dialogue.
They talked widely in the community, and they came back with some concepts for what, in their experience, would make Boise into a vibrant city.
The real issue is that downtown doesn't have anything going on in it. We're proposing also an 8th Street pedestrian mall, basically an enclosed place with a large civic place, and around that would be office, commercial, retail, convention center, and a hotel. A place where a lot of activity happens. A place during this pedestrian experience where, we'll encourage festivals, encourage outdoor things, encourage farmers markets on Saturdays and Sundays.
It was aspirational. Here are the things you should try to achieve. Try to make it a place that people want to come to. Try to make it a place where there's a mix of uses so it's always active. Try to really capitalize on this particular place, and it is a particular place. When you approach for the first time and you look down the bench towards the foothills, there's the dead straight line of Capitol Boulevard with the Capitol at the end of it. It's a breathtaking sight. Then you cross over the river And there's Julie Davis Park with all its cultural assets. Those good bones were enough to inspire the Rudat team. They recognized that something could be done there. The question that was posed to us was, given the concepts from Rudat, how do we make the whole thing fit together financially and in terms of public space? And somehow putting these together, creating some enthusiasm for change which collectively will accomplish the concept.
But not everybody was in agreement with what needed to be done.
There were some not always pleasant meetings because you have a lot of important decisions to make and a lot of passionate people in the room.
I've got to tell you that you have a very serious problem here. And unless you can solve it, absolutely nothing will happen. And another Rudat team will be back in town about 10 years from now telling you the same thing again. You guys have got to get your show together. There are knives in everybody's pockets and they're going in everybody else's backs.
There was a lot of advice in the Rudat report about how these improvements could be funded, and that was a source of a great deal of difficulty.
We would be looking for approximately $20 million to fund the development of the common open space, the amenities, and the public parking component of the 8-block district.
These fights would flare up. If you're going to use this funding for public improvements, that means you're not going to put it into schools. Well, we're pro-education. I don't know about you.
A public meeting was held Monday evening in the Boise City Council chambers to allow final...
At that time, a group of very enthusiastic business owners actually came together and said, we've got to do something different. And they did. They got the petition signed, took it to City Hall, and the ordinance for the Business Improvement District was created.
They were still on a shoestring. It's not like there was all this money raining in from above. And there were developers, but they were cautious.
We had been encouraged at that point, after the years of trying to get the retail downtown, to pursue an office building. And as I stood on the flatbed truck on 9th Street, I sort of turned around and looked at this completely bombed out pit, which was the rest of the 4 blocks that had been kind of leveled. And I remember thinking to myself, I sure hope we know what we're doing here.
Once a plan was developed and it began to be affected, Boise started evolving, and fairly quickly. It started with a major public open space, which is what we call the Grove.
The first sketch of the Grove really was galvanizing because it put together all the things we've been talking about in something graphic that everyone could look at and say, yeah, that's what we meant. Once the first of the new buildings got going and the new sidewalks and landscaping went in alongside it, the whole thing became real and the momentum gathered.
People started to see some activity. It felt safer. One of the first events that they created, which was really interesting, was the Alive After 5. Once you get somebody that comes to an event, they then start to realize, hey, this is a cool spot. So they tell their friends and tell more friends.
All of a sudden there was more activity downtown. Restaurants started coming in, going out from the Grove like spokes. The 8th Street Marketplace area developed, 8th Street North developed.
And that vibrancy moved from 8th Street and further out. It was like somebody turned the key on and said, we can do this.
Boise's had great success, and it's due to the work of a lot of people. Looking back at the mid-'80s and that moment in time where special forces were called upon to say, okay, help us here. The legacy of that Rudat study, well, it'll never end.
What lessons could be learned from Rudat in Boise? I think that something that many people regard as a completely lost cause is absolutely nothing of the sort. That even the most unprepossessing urban environment has inherent assets. And if one can identify those assets and identify how they can be capitalized upon, then you can bring about a tremendous change.